Hello everyone, this is John from Incendium D&D.
Oh god, natural light!
So earlier in the week, Ian and I were discussing back and forth what kind of content we wanted to put out for all of you, because we have a few videos in the pipeline. Then we got the exciting news that we're getting new Unearthed Arcana. So I've taken a look at the new 1D&D playtest material, Expert Classes, and originally I was just gonna go through the whole document when I realized it's 37 pages long, and after over 2 hours of recording, I felt like expediency and more my general thoughts and highlights about the document were more important than making sure we hit every single little bullet point. And so here are my thoughts on expert classes in 1D&D. So first thing I want to start off with, right off the bat, I've seen a lot of people commenting on the fact that the new way that each of D&D's classes are organized are through these subgroups. So the experts, which are Bard, Ranger, and Rogue, kind of fall under the same general tag. What this allows Wizards of the Coast to do in the future is design specific content that they can say is for the expert classes. Now, a lot of people are getting panicky. At first, they're like, this feels like Pathfinder. And now they're like, oh god, it's 4th edition. Well, really, I guess it's more like 2nd edition. But to be honest, this is actually a welcome change. I don't really think it overly affects the way that people are going to build their characters overly much. If anything, it's adding a level of transparency to how to build a balanced party. And I like how with all 3 of these classes, expertise is now a unifying mechanic. And do remember, if you do have specific feedback, make your voice heard in the survey that's going to open on October 20th. So let's start diving into some of the specifics. First things first, kind of like what was teased in the Character Origins UA, Bard is an arcane caster. Meaning that at first level, when they get their spell casting, it's specifically magic from the arcane spell list that's divination, enchantment, illusion, and transmutation. Also, interestingly enough, bards now only have proficiency in simple weapons, so they lost their rapier and hand crossbow proficiencies. I don't know if they're gonna get those back through, say, a rework of the Valor Bard, but I did like the idea of my bard being able to be kind of like a magical swashbuckler. And this does mean that Bard is losing Fairy Fire, since that's on the primal spell list. Another big change is kind of like what we expected. Bardic Inspiration now can be used a proficiency bonus number of times instead of being tied to your charisma modifier. But now Bardic Inspiration is a reaction instead of a bonus action. And the design intent behind this is to make sure that if you're going to give out Bardic Inspiration, you know that it's going to be used. Having played a Bard very recently, and having DM'd for bards for a number of years, there's been plenty of times where the bard wants to give Bardic Inspiration to the fighter or the rogue, but because other support effects, like Fairy Fire, have been set up so well, they never really need to use that Bardic Inspiration. So it ends up just kind of fizzling. So at least with this design, the extra Bardic Inspiration die that you get on a D20 test, you know that you're using it at a time where it's actually gonna be needed. I have seen some concerns that making it a reaction may somehow start to mess with the Bard's action economy. I haven't play tested it. I'm just giving my initial thoughts and impressions. So that is definitely a possibility. Now that being said, they also have this new experimental use of Bardic Inspiration. They can heal as a reaction. That is significant. Also significant because they can't pick up Healing Word at first level because it's not an arcane spell. It was a great example of how I can see, categorizing these classes as experts, compiling the spell list under these general categories of arcane, divine, primal, in a lot of ways might simplify the character building process, the design process, and at 2nd level, bards get like these extra spells that they always have prepared, like Healing Word, Lesser Restoration, that aren't part of the arcane list, but are iconic enough to the Bard that Wizards of the Coast obviously didn't want Bard to lose them. So in some ways, I feel like it actually makes the game a little bit clunkier, but there are definitely other quality of life improvements as well. For example, Bards and Rangers now prepare their spells, and it sounds like that's going to be just an overall thing that happens now. Spells Known was a little too clunky or a little too unforgiving in its implementation. I don't know what Wizard is going to look like, but yeah, Bards and Rangers can re-prepare their spells at the end of each long rest. As you read through this UA, you'll also notice that a lot of features kind of got moved back later in the leveling progression. For example, the Bard's Jack of all trades, which used to be a second level feature, now you don't get until 5th level. Some features have been moved up, so like for Bard, expertise is now a 2nd level feature instead of a 3rd level feature. But I think what this is doing is, even though it's a slight nerf to the single class, it ends up being a big nerf to multi-classing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like Ian and I have talked about on our podcast, Dragon Mind, linked in the description below, classes like Barbarian and Warlock tend to be too front-loaded, meaning that from a power scaling perspective, there's not really a reason not to multi-class out of them. But if some of their key features are gained later in their leveling progression, well, now there's a reason to stick with a single class rather than multi-class out of it. My one concern is that we all know that D&D tends to be played from levels 1 to 10, so by putting a lot of their iconic fun features later, players may not get a chance to actually see them in play. But again, I'll have to play test this, see what it's like. Each of the 3 classes we get also has its SRD subclass, so we do get to see a reworked Lore Bard. Lore Bard is missing additional magical secrets. That's already bumming a lot of people out. Its bonus skill proficiencies aren't just like, pick any 3. Now it's gotta be like, there are certain intelligence lore-based skills that you get. And if you already have one, you don't lose out on a skill proficiency, you can pick another one. I do think that better matches the theming of a bard that gathers a lot of lore. And magical secrets is reworked. So it used to be that when you got magical secrets at Bard 10 or Bard 6 with Old College of Lore, you would be able to pick any 2 spells, but then those choices were locked in based on your spell slot progression. So if you were a 10th level bard, you would get 2 spells from any spell list, but they had to be 5th level or lower, meaning once you started getting 6th and 7th level spell slots, you couldn't like trade out your magical secrets for a higher level spell. Well, now it seems you can. Now with magical secrets, you get to pick a spell list, either Divine, Primal, or the other half of Arcane, and you get to prepare 2 spells that are on that spell list, and you get to re-prepare them along with your other spells when you finish a long rest. Meaning, let's say you pick Divine at 10th. You take some new Divine spells. Once you have 6th level spell slots, you can swap one of those Divine spells out for a 6th level Divine spell. I can definitely see how this is actually a more powerful magical secret, and why they wouldn't want to gift lore bards that too early. So yes, I understand in a lot of ways it is a nerf, and I understand the design reasoning. And again, I have to play test it myself to see if this really is a big loss or if the rebalancing makes sense. One last thing, Jeremy Crawford mentioned this in his official interview with Todd Kenrick, the videos of which you can find on the Dungeons & Dragons official YouTube channel. Highly recommend you check those out. He explained that for each spellcasting class, they have a list of recommended spells to prepare. I think that this can be neat if you have nowhere to start or you really want to play to the most iconic version of the class in the eyes of Wizards of the Coast. Some of these spells, though, are a little odd. So, like, Bard doesn't start with Dissonant Whispers. It starts with, like, Color Spray and Disguise Self, which are fun spells, but, like, not the most useful ones. Because Bards also have prepared spells instead of spells known, they actually lose out on the number of spells they have access to early on. It's very, very odd. But, anywho, moving on to Ranger. Yo, Ranger got quite the chassis bump with this. First, spellcasting is part of their first level kit. They also get cantrips. So in Tasha's, there was this option of having your fighting style be that you get 2 druid cantrips. It was neat, not necessarily something I think I'd recommend, but now all rangers have cantrips. You still get a fighting style at 2nd level, we'll talk about that, but you also get cantrips right from 1st level on top of it. I think this is a neat decision. To me, though, the most significant one is that Favored Enemy went back to the pre-Tasha's playtest version. Back before Tasha's officially came out and we got the new Favored Foe, you know, where it requires concentration, it's like a D4 extra damage. There was this idea of just giving Rangers Hunter's Mark and saying, if you're a Ranger, you can cast it without concentration. I thought that was genius, and then they didn't do it, but now they're doing it again. So I think that is going to be a significant difference in the Rangers' overall play. I do think it's interesting, again, there are things like how the roving feature is now part of the main chassis, it's no longer an optional feature, and it's gained a little bit later because you're getting spellcasting earlier. They're just kind of shifting things around. And one thing I need to stick with, Rangers get expertise at 1st level, just like rogues. Hunter's Mark and Sneak Attack, they both add a damage boost. Sneak Attack is more conditional, but you can also trigger it more often. Hunter's Mark is like the big bad boss. Hunter's Mark it D6 extra damage. Overall, giving expertise to Ranger right at 1st level, I think really solidifies the playstyle they had imagined for the Ranger, and it makes it general enough that it's actually likely to see play. Now, looking at the rework of Hunter, this is actually an interesting one. Player's Handbook Hunter had a menu of options each time you got a subclass feature. And some of them were good, some of them were alright. But really, I think they got the idea that, you know, Colossus Slayer was the good option. And so they don't even offer the other ones anymore. So 3rd level, Hunter's Prey is the Colossus Slayer option. Although the extra D8 damage that you deal can be procced from either a weapon or an unarmed strike, meaning that your Ranger can also be like part Tavern Brawler. It's a really cool little addition that they made. The one thing they got rid of was like the Hunter defense. Now they have Hunter's Lore, which when you Hunter's Mark a target allows you to know any resistances or vulnerabilities or immunities to damage that the target has. It is a really nice way of kind of integrating a core class feature and allowing you to get helpful knowledge without being too meta-gamey about it. Also with Hunter, they're playing with this idea of being able to downcast spells. So the 10th level Hunter feature is Conjure Barrage, but if you want to use a 1st or a 2nd level spell slot, you can trade in less damage, but having a more efficient use of it. I thought that was a really interesting way to go about it. Overall, I really like what they're doing with Ranger. I think that it's definitely a much more playable character, and it's by now has kind of shaken off the stigma of, you know, Rangers in 5e are bad. Now we just gotta see if they can fix the monk. My boy the Rogue. So, Rogue is an interesting one. In his interview with Todd Kenrick, Jeremy Crawford mentioned that Rogue had really high satisfaction ratings, and they've made some interesting choices with it. So we all know from the character Origins UA that Thieves' Cant is now considered a language proficiency. You still get that as a rogue, you also get an additional language on top of it, meaning that rogues at base are going to be pentalingual. As usual, they have expertise, although their 2nd expertise feature you don't get until 7th level instead of 6th. Sneak Attack, though, actually got this really subtle nerf. So as usual, Sneak Attack triggers on advantage. It also triggers when an ally is within 5 feet of your target. That's different. It used to say like a creature hostile to the target. Meaning if, for example, you have like a 3-faction combat encounter going on, it's like as long as there's an enemy of the target that you're targeting, say that 3 times fast, you get Sneak Attack. Now you have to have an ally within 5 feet. I get it, but I don't know. A lot of your classic rogue stuff is still here. Uncanny Dodge, Evasion, although again, Evasion is bumped to 9th level instead of 7th. A new one that I think Jeremy Crawford was really excited about, I don't know if I am though. 13th level, you get this like subtle strike feature, where if an ally is within 5 feet of your target, you get advantage, meaning you're more likely to hit, more likely to crit, and it's very clear you get that sneak attack damage. I think I'd rather have this earlier though. Overall, I think where Rogue is benefiting isn't from its change in its chassis, but in a lot of the rules glossary changes we'll see later on. For example, as you read, you'll see certain rules will be underlined, like attack action now may have a revised definition. Hide is another one. They really need to clean up those hide rules. And even light weapon, now there's not that clunky, you get 2-weapon fighting as a bonus action anymore. Now the Thief subclass, Jeremy Crawford hinted at the fact that it had low satisfaction ratings. Based on what I'm seeing, I don't think that's gonna change. At 3rd level, you get fast hands, so you can search or pickpocket or lockpick as a bonus action. Not sure that's really coming up a lot in games where when you say that something's a bonus action, you're suggesting it should be used in combat. And I don't see those things happening in combat. Second story work, I think, is a little better. They made jumping related to dexterity instead of strength. Again, it's nice, it's thematic, I can see its utility and exploration, but if I'm gonna have that next to Arcane Trickster, there's no way I'm not picking Arcane Trickster over this version of Thief. There are other interesting things, like at higher levels, it can attune up to 4 magic items. It can roll a d6 when it uses a magic item requiring charges to see if it can randomly not have to spend a charge. Some interesting things, but again, it's still just as boring as it was in the SRD. So next in the dock, we have feats. And man, are there a lot of feats here. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room. Epic boons are now feats that every character class gets at 20th level. I was really hoping they would be rebalanced, and they are not.
I think we all know where this is going, so let's just skip to the end.
For example, there's one epic boon where you can Misty Step without expending a spell slot once per short or long rest. There's another epic boon where the damage you deal ignores resistance. Those two things are nowhere near equal. And there's another epic boon that's like, when you make a death save, as long as it's not a 1, it's a success. Like, none of that is balanced. So, epic boons, in general, I hate them because they're so wildly unbalanced. I definitely think there are cooler ideas that they can have, and I will let them know in my survey feedback on October 20th, as should you. So kind of like what was teased with the Character Origins UA, every feat now has a level. Besides the epic boons, which are like the 20th level feats, every other feat is 4th level. Almost, it might be all of them, are also half feats. So instead of the ability score improvement feat, basically I think the optimal thing is going to be picking another feat moving forward. Some interesting things to note, fighting style is now also a feat, but it's a 1st level feat. So while rangers get access to it at 2nd level, I think if you're gonna be like a warrior or an expert, if I'm reading the rules right, you can pick fighting style as part of your background, which is a lot cooler in terms of character building.
All right, who's not dead? Sound off.
Now, in terms of feats, it's also a mixed bag. Some of the feats that were generally considered bad in the player's handbook are still bad. Actor, athlete, defensive duelist, dual wielder are not particularly impressive. Some feats got significantly better, specifically Charger and Durable, and some other feats just got some weird reworks. So like Observant and Keen Mind both give you now skill proficiencies, but if you already have that skill proficiency, you can double down on it and get an expertise in it. That's kind of nice. I really like the idea of if you're already proficient, you can stack your proficiency and now have expertise. And some feats definitely got a rework. Crossbow Expert, Great Weapon Master, Polearm Master, Sentinel, Sharpshooter. They're feats that were considered overpowered, and they've definitely been rebalanced. Overall, I'm most disappointed in the epic boons. I really like the rebalanced feats. I just wish the ones like Actor, another one was Inspiring Leader. I really just want them to get a little bit more. So the last little section to talk about
pocket sand. Yeah.
Is the rules glossary. First, it makes it clear that basically if a term isn't in the newest UA, you don't use terms from older UAs. Critical hits have reverted to what they were. Nat 1s and Nat 20s on saving throws and ability checks have been discarded. But we do get some significant clarifications and changes here. One, like I mentioned before, is 2-weapon fighting. Now if you're dual wielding, you can make the second attack as part of the attack action, which is kind of nice. Second, I do think there were some significant changes to what they call heroic inspiration, which is instead of getting inspiration on a 20, you get inspiration when you roll a nat 1. And the idea is that you're kind of fulfilling this failing forward narrative, but also what I think it would prevent is, say, using inspiration to get advantage. Oh look, another 20, I get inspiration. Instead, you're almost preventing yourself from getting inspiration by trying not to get a nat 1, but you're softening the blow for critical failure if that's what you end up rolling. There are also some interesting added actions here, like the study action, the jump action. Magic is now its own action as opposed to cast a spell, which also includes the use of magic items. And probably my favorite clarification, hide. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but I like how now there is a hidden condition and there are very clear rules for hiding, instead of it just being like, does the DM decide that you can hide or not hide? I do wish that we could get the old hide rules for Lightfoot Halfling, so that they can hide behind their allies like they used to be able to. Overall, I think that I need to digest the rules glossary a little bit more. There are probably some hidden implications that I really didn't digest on my first read through. But overall, I'm pretty excited for this UA. I do think that Bard and Rogue took a little bit of a hit, and Ranger got a significant boost. That's probably the one I'm most excited about. But hey, we'll let you know our thoughts as soon as we get a chance to play test it. So now I want to know, what are your thoughts on the expert classes Unearthed Arcana? Are these changes that you're excited about? Are you groaning over a lot of the different nerfs and rebalances? Let us know in the comments down below. If you like this video, let YouTube know, give us a like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and have an awesome day, everybody. Bye-bye now.